This is the new 4th generation Skoda Superb. And if you're familiar with the Superb, or indeed Skoda, it probably won't surprise you to hear that this is comfortable, practical, and competitively priced. This new Superb is even bigger than before. It's more advanced than ever, and it comes with a new plug-in hybrid option with a huge electric range. But is this car actually a bit of a backward step compared to the previous Superb? Keep watching, because in this review, we're going to tell you everything that you need to know. But first, if you want to see lots more car reviews like this, make sure you subscribe to our channel. So, the Skoda Superb first arrived back in 2001, and that car was comfortable, practical, decent inside, and it was incredible value compared to its rivals at the time. And basically, over the following generations, that formula has stayed the same, whether you've gone for a hatch or an estate, like this one. The estate's been available since the 2nd generation Superb, by the way. And this new model, the 4th generation car, has been developed alongside the VW Passat. So those two cars are very closely related. But the Passat you can only have as an estate. This is available as a hatch or an estate. And in terms of changes for this new model compared to the old one, you can see on the outside there's a slightly different grille, but really in the looks department, this is clearly not a radical departure from what's come before. Inside, there are some more noticeable changes compared to the previous model. So now this interior is very much what you get in the new Skoda Kodiaq. So that means you've got this 10-inch digital driver display, which has got nice graphics, it's helpfully configurable as well, and it is very easy to see it. It's quite hard to position the steering wheel in a way that will block some of the view, so that is good. Over here, you've got a 13-inch touchscreen infotainment system on the dashboard, and it's mounted nice and high up, so you don't have to take your eyes too far from the road to see it. It's also within easy reach as well, so that is good. The operating system itself is reasonably responsive and relatively intuitive. Most importantly, you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, which is great. Now down here, there are 3 physical dials, which is brilliant to see. So these ones on the outside control the temperature for the climate control. They also can control the heated seats or the ventilation if you've got that on your spec of car. And this middle one can control a few different functions. So you can zoom in on the map, you can change the volume, you can adjust the fan speed, and you can cycle through those different functions by pushing it in. And you've also got these physical buttons around these dials down here. Now it's brilliant to see this because they are very easy to use on the move and far better than other rivals which have got all their climate controls on a fiddly touchscreen menu that's really distracting to use while you're driving. No such problems here. For example, in a VW Passat, that's got a kind of slider touch sensitive setup, which is just way more distracting to use than these dials here. But this isn't perfect, because when you actually use these dials, as you probably will quite often, you can notice immediately that they're just a bit wobbly and flimsy and pretty cheap feeling, to be honest. And it is very disappointing. And that's one of a few areas where the quality isn't a knockout success in this Skoda Superb. So on the dashboard here, this trim is a bit wobbly and creaky. Some of the plastics lower down aren't particularly amazing. And overall, a VW Passat, although it's not as good from a usability perspective because of those climate control issues, in terms of quality, it's a bit more consistently polished than the Superb's interior. But this is very good when it comes to storage, and very similar to the Passat, as you'd imagine. For the new car, the gear selector has moved from previously being down here on the center console to now being up here on the steering column. So that's freed up some extra storage space down here. And it means you've got 2 cup holders, you've got a spot for your wireless phone charging, and you can also cover this up to make it look a bit neater and keep your valuables out of sight as well. And under this armrest, you've got a really good amount of storage under there, plus you get this handy wiper to get your mucky fingerprints off the touchscreen, which is very useful to have. So, overall, not the greatest interior out there, but from a usability perspective, it's really good having these dials. It's just a shame that the quality isn't a bit more impressive. Now, the Superb has always been a massive car, and this new version is even bigger than the old one. But the changes in dimensions aren't particularly significant, and actually in terms of this interior space, it's exactly the same as it was before. But that is no problem at all, because sat in these rear seats, you've got absolutely loads of legroom. Headroom is equally generous, so even enormous adults could be sat in the back here and they'd be extremely comfortable on long journeys. Now the seats can't slide or recline or do anything fancy like that, and if you are sat in this middle seat then you're raised up slightly higher than the outer two, but you've still got loads of headroom above you. There is though quite a big transmission tunnel down here which you can see, and so that isn't great for foot space. But if no one is sat in this middle seat, then you can pull down this armrest to reveal not only two cup holders but also this phone or tablet holder, so you can watch some videos on a long journey. Boot space has always been one of the main reasons to buy a Skoda Superb estate, and now for this 4th generation car there is more of it than ever. At 690 litres you get 30 litres more than you did in the previous car. So the boot in this Superb estate is absolutely huge. But we have a plug-in hybrid version here, and this is quite a bit smaller than the regular petrol or diesel versions of this car. So you can see there is some underfloor storage at the front here, which is a handy space for the charging cables, but further back all of that room is taken up for the battery bits and pieces that you need for this plug-in hybrid. And that means that the overall capacity drops from 690 litres down to 510 litres, which is a very, very big swing indeed. And actually, this plug-in hybrid compared to other estate cars like the Toyota Corolla Touring Sports and the Peugeot 508 SW doesn't look quite so spectacular as the regular petrol and diesel versions of this car. But you can still see this is a really big, simple, open area that you have. You've got this electrically powered parcel shelf, which is very fancy. You've got a handy cubby hole. There's virtually no loading lip at the front. And it's also very simple to drop the rear seats using these levers in the back. If you go for a hatchback version of the Superb, then as you'd imagine, there is less boot space than in this estate car. But at 645 litres, it is still absolutely massive, certainly compared to its hatchback rivals as well. And because you can't get a plug-in hybrid version of the hatch, whichever trim, whichever engine you get in the Superb hatch, that is the size of boot that you'll get. There are 3 petrols, 2 diesels and a plug-in hybrid in the Superb lineup. And of those regular petrol and diesel engines, they're pretty familiar, we've seen them before. The very interesting choice in the lineup though is the plug-in hybrid. It's called the 1.5 TSI IV. It has 201 brake horsepower and an official range of more than 80 miles, which is incredibly far for a plug-in hybrid. And of course, that is very similar to the VW Passat plug-in hybrid, as you'd expect, because the two cars are so closely related. But compared to all other plug-in hybrid estates, this is very, very impressive when it comes to range. It is a shame, though, that you can't get a plug-in hybrid set up on the hatchback version of the Superb. It's not just the pure electric range that impresses either, it's also the charging speeds of this car, because the Superb estate plug-in can accept a maximum charging rate of 50 kilowatts, which means that it can use public fast chargers and get a 10 to 80% top up in 20 minutes. And charging that quickly is still pretty rare for plug-in hybrids. Anyway, what's the Superb like on the road? Well, with the standard passive suspension setup, this is not as comfortable as you might imagine. It's certainly not uncomfortable, but if you want the best riding version of this car, then you need to go for a Superb in SEL trim with the DCC option box ticked, or go for a top spec L and K model. Because if you do that, then you get DCC, which is dynamic chassis control. And that is effectively an adaptive suspension setup for the Superb. And it lets you fine tune the ride of this car using a slider on the touchscreen. So you can make it stiffer or softer to the exact level that you want. And there are, of course, some driving mode presets that you can cycle through as well to make it a little bit simpler and quicker to do. And it's fantastic to have this level of adjustment in the car. Of course, we have seen this before in VWs and in Skodas, but in the wider car world, it's something that's pretty rare and great to have. Not only for the adjustment that you get, but also for the fact that in the softer, most comfortable settings, this is a really smooth riding car that is definitely one of the best in the class. It isn't, though, quite as smooth as the VW Passat, which of course has a very similar setup and the same adaptive suspension available, but that car is just a little bit smoother than the Skoda Superb estate. It also steers a little better as well, but not that this is bad. And helpfully, this is a massive car, but manoeuvring it around town is really easy. You've got light accurate steering. And even though this, of course, as you'd imagine, isn't as fun or as agile as a smaller estate like a BMW 3 Series Touring, you can still place the Superb estate with confidence at higher speeds. Value has always been key to the appeal of the Skoda Superb, and thankfully that is still the case for this new model, whether you go for the hatch or for the estate. Now, if you compare this to the VW Passat, you might at a glance think that this is incredible value because it's even cheaper than that car, which is very similar to this. However, the starting prices are different because the very cheapest Passat is slightly better equipped than the very cheapest Superb. So actually across the lineup, spec for spec, the two cars are pretty similar. Don't be put off by the cheapest trim level in the Superb though, because it still comes with a decent amount of kit in both the hatch and the estate, and because of the great value it represents, is the easiest trim level to recommend. It's called SE technology and comes with things like adaptive cruise control as well as heated and massaging front seats. Above it you'll find SEL, Sportline and range-topping L and K. But which engine should you go for? Now, normally when a car offers a petrol, a diesel and a plug-in hybrid in its engine lineup, the plug-in hybrid is difficult to recommend because typically it's loads more expensive to buy than the other versions. And also, if the real world pure electric range is around 25 to 30 miles, then to be honest, you need a very predictable, specific lifestyle to be able to keep your running costs low, because once the battery is flat, then the fuel economy that you get is terrible. But with the Superb and the Passat, the plug-in hybrids have an official range of more than 80 miles, and that is where plug-in hybrids like this can become easier to recommend. And also the plug-in hybrids feel a bit better resolved as well. The regular petrols and diesels are a bit rattly and old school by comparison. Whichever version you go for, you get a 3-year or 60,000 mile warranty as standard, which to be honest isn't particularly special, but Skoda does have a fairly good reputation when it comes to reliability, finishing 13th out of 31 manufacturers in our latest reliability survey. But for a brand that represents sensible, value-focused choices, it is a shame that it doesn't offer a more generous warranty than that. So, the new Skoda Superb is a lot like the old ones. It's massive, comfortable, refined, good value for money. It's not, though, perfect, because aspects of the new car's interior aren't quite as solid as the old one. And while this plug-in hybrid estate is a really compelling choice in the lineup, it is just about beaten by the very closely related VW Passat, which is slightly nicer inside and slightly better resolved on the road as well. This, though, is still a great car, whether you go for the hatch or the estate. Thanks very much for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there. Make sure you subscribe to our channel as well. And to read our extended written review of the Superb estate and the Superb hatch, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.